point seemed incredibly well, glamorous and exciting, I suddenly saw as, you know, kind of pandering to egos of all these rock stars and so on. And I don't know, it just seemed very empty. And I just had the feeling that, you know, there was more to life. And also I just realized I had no idea who I was in it, because I was just so kind of identified with my role. So yeah, it just seemed like I needed to find out, actually, you know, kind of who I was and what life was really about. So it actually seemed very easy and very natural to do. You know, I had to do it in a way. Once I'd realized that, there was no turning back.
So yeah, as we said, that took you to Cornwall. It would be lovely to trace the whole journey with you. I mean, that was what I was feeling when we were talking last Thursday. I could love to hear the step-by-step account. And obviously we've got a very specific brief this evening. So I'm going to need to take us through us. Yeah, you met Manju Vajra, you met the Metta Bhavana, you became deeply involved in our movement, and you joined the order. And I was thinking it would be really lovely just to hear a bit about your name. What does your name mean, and how did you feel when you received it?
I feel quite embarrassed, really, because yeah, my name was everything I didn't want. I really didn't want to be, you know, sort of like three people all sharing some part of the name. I wanted an individual name, and I didn't want a long name, and I really didn't want to be a Ratna. I had the idea that Bhante called people Ratna something when they didn't really have any qualities that he could pick out particularly, so he'd just call you a jewel. So yes, I mean, when he first said the name, he said it so beautifully. I can still hear it, replay it in my mind. He just had this very, very beautiful sort of rhythm to it, Ratnavandana. The way he said it, it just rolled and it sounded so lovely. And yet, you know, there it was, all these things. I knew the others were going to be Ratnas, and that was Ratnashuri and Ratnadakini I was ordained with. So I was one of three Ratnas, and I had a long name, and I was a Ratna. And it means, I mean, actually, I've come to see that it's probably the greatest gift he could have given me. It means, he said it meant jewel of devotion or jeweled salutation. And that devotion he talked about being in its highest sense to the three jewels, but it was devotion to everything that lives. Which was very lovely. But at that time, I didn't value that quality in myself at all. I kind of poo-pooed it and thought it was, you know, insignificant, basically. Didn't have a particularly good relationship with that aspect of myself. And so I was really thrown that he had chosen to give me this name. But the journey from there to where I stand today, as I say, it's the greatest gift he could have given me in terms of really allowing something that is very natural to me, that is very much, you know, sort of who I am, I feel, to, you know, flower and blossom over the years.
And it's just very much that quality that you've just evoked in describing your name that I think is what led us to invite you to be here tonight. For me, I have a vivid memory of I think it was about 6 years ago, you gave a very moving talk on an area order weekend about, well, it was actually about the simplicity of living as an anagarika, but you were talking about living simply, living sacredly, living as if every moment is an offering. And that really brings us right into the heart of our area for this evening. So I wondered if you could say a bit now about what the word sacred means to you.
Yeah. it's a mystery, really. It's you know, one of those things I find incredibly difficult to you know, to pin down, because it's different things at different times, and essentially it's an experience anyway. But it's, I suppose, you know, it's spiritual truth, you know, direct experience of the truth in some sort of way. I mean, I remember very strongly when I first heard those words, as I said, about with Manjivajra. It's just that sort of, there's that knowing, that resonance within, that something is true. Having that, you know, kind of experience just feels very, very strong. And yeah, the way that that kind of unfolds, things unfold from there into a wonderful sense of interconnectedness. I mean, that feels like a very key aspect of it, because all of a sudden, when I'm in contact with that experience, it feels as though everything, you know, all the divisions, all the boundaries just fall away. And there's nothing to separate anything, and there's, you know, there's no me here and everything else out there. There's just this wonderful sense of interconnectedness with everything, a real sense of being part of everything, of oneness. So yeah, perhaps that gives you a bit of an idea.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And something that's coming to my mind when we were speaking the other day, you were mentioning, if you're going back to your experience as a child, the way that you'd been brought up to think of the sacred was actually very different to that, I think. Or could you just maybe say a bit about that?
Well, I had a Catholic upbringing and a Catholic convent, and so there was a very particular, you know, very strong message about what the sacred was. And my own experiences, I was just in quite a lot of conflict about it, because I didn't resonate with, you know, what I was being told was sacred in the way that it was explained and talked about, or even, you know, although there could be some experience of certain atmospheres in churches or chapels and so on. For me, it was really when I was in the natural world, in nature, and as a child, I spent a lot of time in the natural world. I had a pony, and my pony and I would go off, particularly to these very beautiful woods. And I mean, there, it was just as though, you know, I had a really strong experience of the sacred. Everything that lives is holy, as Blake says. And it was just very much in contrast with what I was being told about what was sacred.
And so it was quite a few years ago now when you formed this very definite intention of living sacredly, or I think you said living as if your whole life were an offering.
That's right, yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, it was when I moved here in 2008, and I had, for a long time, I'd wanted to do a long retreat. So I planned a 6-month solitary retreat. That's how I came to move to this place that I'm living in now. And for, I don't know, a long time before that, I had been really dissatisfied with the quality of my life overall. You know, I mean, there were those occasions when I was on retreat, and in particular when I was on solitary retreat, where I felt I was just living at a different level. I was just living, you know, in the presence of the sacred. It was just such a beautiful experience, and it felt as though, I don't know, the whole meaning of life, quality of life, everything took on a different relationship somehow. Your whole relationship to life was different. And yet I would then come home like everyone else, and of course I was working, and although at this time towards the end, I had wound up the MIT convening work. But it was just the difference between kind of what I called ordinary everyday life and that experience of that heightened sense of connection, that heightened sense of significance. And I really wanted to explore. I just felt it must be possible, you know, to kind of bring the mundane into the sacred. And I really wanted to try and see, you know, if it could be possible, if I could really do that. And so I thought a 6-month solitary retreat was the perfect conditions really to give it a try. 6 months is a fairly substantial period of time. And I set the retreat up as my life as an offering, on the basis then of really trying to be more conscious when I was just performing, you know, ordinary, everyday, mundane acts. And part of what was very important in that was that Avalokiteshvara was going to be my witness, at least I hoped very much, would be my witness. Avalokiteshvara is the bodhisattva who I took when I was ordained, his meditation practice, and my relationship with him had been developing very strongly. And I had a very, very strong sense of his presence, and just felt that if I was able to, in a way, be open to his presence, he would witness me, and it would in that witnessing, it would give the significance to those million mundane acts one does every day. So I just started off by offering everything to him, everything that I did. In words, I would just say something, you know, whether it was having a shower or feeding the cat or having a pee, all those ordinary things, you know, cooking my food. And at first, you know, I felt very self-conscious about it. It felt really odd to be kind of, well, you know, kind of having that sense of his presence at those times. And how was I going to offer it in a meaningful way? And, you know, it was all pretty clunky to begin with. But actually, it wasn't long before it just felt like it took on a life of its own. The significance just grew, and it had this wonderful effect of just raising the whole kind of level of awareness in my life generally. Just, you know, having that sense of significance about everything and seeing how it all connected up, and why certain, you know, ordinary, boring, mundane things were actually so much more than that. I had this kind of, I don't know, attitude of attending to life being an act of love. And so in all those ordinary things, you know, having that very kind of, trying to have that very open-hearted sense of that along with it. And yes, well, it was amazing, really, really amazing. And I'm so glad I gave it a try.
Mm. And yeah, you've mentioned Avalokiteshvara. I know you also have a strong connection with the Mandala of the 5 Buddhas. And at one point, you've spoken of living in the Mandala of the 5 Buddhas. I wondered if you could say something about that.
Mm. Well, it was Avalokiteshvara who took me into the Mandala. I was very fortunate to be given a 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara sadhana practice that Kuladitra brought back from Dado Rinpoche. I can't remember exactly when it was. It might have been in the late 80s, something like that. Anyway, there was this, all of a sudden, this wonderful, I had been doing the 4-armed Avalokiteshvara practice prior to that. And with Bante's permission, I started doing this new 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara sadhana. And in the sadhana, there's a point at which it's a point of real tension between the Avalokiteshvara figure in it, at which point he is just one head, two arms, etc. And the 5 Buddha Mandala. And it's the tension, I suppose, between him being able to kind of manifest in the world and relieve suffering in the way that he wanted to, very, very strongly connected in the sadhana with Amitabha. There's something in that tension that he then becomes the 1,000-arm form. And it had an incredible impact doing that particular sadhana. But also, of course, it felt like it took me right into the 5 Buddha Mandala in a way that, I mean, obviously I knew of the mandala and had been, sort of, just attracted to lots of the different Buddhas in it, but I had never particularly thought of it in relation to my own practice. But from that point on, really, that's what's happened. And it's just been so interesting feeling that it's very guided by Avalokiteshvara. I've had periods of time doing the sadhanas of all the different Buddhas in the mandala. I feel none of it. I haven't chosen any of it. My practice is very much about self-surrender. I'm wanting very much to surrender my will to his will, and let come through what needs to come through, and whichever Buddha that happens to be. And to this day, when I go to do my sadhana practice, I'm just open to who might arise, as it were. So it's been a very wonderful ongoing, sort of, treat. It's just amazing. Very difficult to say, really, put in words what it means.
I think that was very eloquent. And you mentioned, this idea of self-surrender. So we asked the Sangha if anyone had questions for you, as you know, and Rowan had a question in the area of, when you practice with everything being sacred, does that include yourself? And isn't that a bit dangerous? Is there a danger of kind of having too big an idea of yourself in a way? I wondered if you could say something about that. Is it a very advanced practice? How fruitful is it? But
Well, I've no idea in terms of how advanced it might be, but certainly my experience is very much not that, because it's in a way the self disappears. That sort of sense of myself disappears at those times. I mean, when I have a very strong sense of presence in myself, that I'm really, really there, it's as though that just very naturally opens out. It's like this unfolding, something just opens, and it opens out into this wonderful interconnected state that I talked about when I first said what it means, that somehow it's all of a sudden there is no me and other. I'm just part of everything, and everything is part of me. There are no divisions, no boundaries, nothing. So it just doesn't arise in that way. It's just not. I mean, I haven't thought about it in any sense, just because it doesn't feel applicable somehow in that, because you're just in that very open, state.
The way you describe it is, it's an ongoing opening, not that kind of closing in, grasping, selfing kind of.
No.
Thank you. And Janaka was interested to ask, what would you say has been the most significant development in your practice of the Brahma Viharas since you were here with us 5 years ago during the Rains retreat in 2015? And what are you working on at the moment? They're sort of probably related questions.
Well, I don't know that there's been kind of like a significant development. Hopefully, there's been a deepening. I mean, my practice, I'm still very much on the same path with my practice, which is very much the Brahma Viharas and living in the Mandala of the Brahma Viharas and the 5 Buddhas and Avalokiteshvara, very much my heart connection. And I think that with the Brahma Viharas, my sense that the work that we need to do, in particular with metta, it just becomes ever more clear to me that it's about getting ourselves out of the way. It's about, purifying the klesas, all the clouds that block the sun. There's that lovely quote from Rumi, which I will be able to tell you correctly. And he says, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And I feel that that is the task, because it's there. If we can remove those barriers, the love is there. So I think I think that's there's a stronger sense of that. The other thing that has been very strong as well is the something to do with Karuna and Mudita and the need for them to be balanced. Another image that I have for the Brahma Viharas, which I think I probably did say on that retreat, is the image of a bird. And the body of the bird is metta, which is, the root Brahma Vihara. And then the wings of the bird are karuna and mudita. And then the whole bird in flight is upekkha, equanimity. And with that image, it's very clear, isn't it, that, the bird couldn't fly if karuna and mudita weren't in balance in some sort of way. And yes, I think that's just become clearer and clearer how important they both are and how much they need to be in balance for equanimity to arise.
And I'm struck by you talking about how with your practice of the Brahma Viharas, there's a deepening. Over the last 5 years, it's not that there's something new to report, but that confidence in that kind of deepening process. And I think that's something that is very striking about your faithfulness in your practice, that you've been very faithfully deepening your practice of the Brahma Viharas, not over years but over decades. And one final thing I did want to ask you about as well is another area where you've been faithful over many, many years, and that is to Hakuin's Song of Meditation. I think that was when I met you on a retreat about 20 years ago, and you were partway through. I think it was 11 consecutive years of leading reflection retreats for Mitras at Taraloka on Hakuin's Song of Meditation, which is very much in this territory you've been talking about, isn't it? It starts, all beings are from the very beginning Buddhas. And it has that beautiful line, this very place, the lotus paradise. So I wondered if you could just say what your first connection with that was and how that's woven into your practice.
Well, I mean, I think it was one of those, when I first came across it, it was one of those truth teachings, that just had an enormous impact on me. And I was just astounded, really, that the whole path was there in those, it's not very long, but in these beautiful, beautiful lines, he manages to convey everything about the entire path. And also it's something to do with the absolute confidence, this very body, the Buddha, it's just expressed so beautifully. And the more that you actually, kind of look into it and get into it, it's one of those, beautiful, beautiful poems that just draw you, I think. And, you know, it just unfolds more and more. There's deeper and deeper layers to go through. And it, you know, never ceases to sort of reveal something new. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. And I'm very delighted that you've really kindly agreed to read us that poem at the start of our meditation towards the end of the evening, and to lead us in a just sitting to have a taste of the practice of what you've been, just really evoking for us so beautifully. So thank you very much, Ratnavandana.
Thank you. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's a real delight to be with you all.